financial crisis of 2007 to 2008 was the largest and most severe financial event ever since the Great Depression. This reshaped the world of finance and investment banking. The effects are still being felt today, yet many people do not understand the cause or what took place. Before anything else, here is a brief summary of the events that redefined the industry of the world in 2007 and 2008. The underlying cause of the financial crisis was a combination of debt and mortgage-backed assets. Since the end of World War II, the house prices in the United States have been steadily rising. There have been few fluctuations, but the trend has always been upward. In the 1980s, financial institutions and traders realized that the U.S. mortgages were previously untapped assets. Traders at Solomon Brothers and Drexel Burnham Lambert were looking to expand the bond market, and they discovered that the steady stream of payments from the U.S. mortgages could be restructured into bonds and sold off to investors. Prior to this, investors had no access to the U.S. mortgage market other than buying real estate or investing in construction companies, which was suboptimal and did not necessarily give the correct exposure to house prices. There are many reasons why economists think this crisis happened. Most economists believe it started in the United States. From 1997 until 2006, people bought expensive houses, even though they did not have enough money to pay for it. Since the money had come from other countries, it was easy to have called good credit. This created an economic bubble which caused the house prices to rise. Because they had a lot of money, the loaning companies made it easier to get a loan, even if the borrower did not have a good credit history. This is where the snowball effect happened. During this time, many homeowners refinanced their homes. This caused their mortgages to change, giving them lower interest. Homeowners could take out another mortgage by asking for another loan. Loaning companies changed their loans so that they would have low interest at first, which would steadily increase later. The companies did this to try to convince more people to take loans. Many people with subprime loans also took the adjustable rate mortgages, hoping that good price of housing would help them refinance later. While the housing prices were still high, many American and European companies, including banks, invested in subprime loans. These investments gave more money to the loaning companies, who used it to give out more subprime loans. These investments would make a lot of money as long as the housing prices were still high. The housing companies built too many houses, causing the price of housing to decrease beginning in the summer of 2006. The value of many homes dropped below the value of the remaining mortgage debt, so the owners of the houses were not able to sell and move away. Roughly 8.8 million household owners in the United States had zero or negative equity by March of 2008. This caused the number of foreclosure on homes to increase, meaning that many people lost their homes. During 2007, almost 1.3 million United States homes could be foreclosed on. However, the number of houses for sale continued to increase, which made their prices decrease. The homeowners with subprime loans left their houses with less money than they were bought, which meant that the loans were worth more than the value of the house. The loaning companies were not able to make money from these houses. The collapse in the housing bubble caused the value of investment to fall. The company had invested subprime loans that lost to a total of $512 billion. Citigroup and Merrill Lynch were two companies which lost the most money. More than half of the money lost, which consisted of $260 billion, were lost by American firms. Here are some arguments to the crisis and how we can compare it to the Philippines. Moreover, why weren't we affected by the crisis of 2008? However, where were we lacking? What can we consider the factors that contribute to these shortcomings? Number 1. Financial regulation systems. It is a long-held debate in the U.S. government what the role of the government should be in a free market. It has long been lobbied by the financial corporations that the government should not intervene at all. Regulations will inhibit the free market. with too much interference by the government arguably preventing the market to grow naturally. When in reality, regulation will inhibit profits of big corporations, but preventing them from taking risky investments, ensuring that the companies will be held accountable for the government sanctioned agency. This was showcased perfectly in the 2008 financial crisis, where the lack of regulation did lead to near catastrophic financial meltdown. What happened to that again? Well, the government was held responsible, having to bail out the big financial companies to prevent total economic collapse. What would have happened if a regulatory board were there? Well, 1. The crisis may have been prevented. 2. The companies would be held more accountable for their actions. And 3. The market would have not collapsed worldwide. This is in contrast to the Philippines, which actually has one of the best financial regulators in the world, in Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. This has allowed for natural market growth, low interest rates, and higher accountability for Philippine banks in terms of their actions. This may be a positive point, a fair argument. However, such elitism can be observed in that system, leading us to
Number 2. Social inequality in the Philippines. The Philippines has the highest income inequality rate among members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, a recent study made by a local research firm has revealed. In a study, the ADB said that the vast inequality in the Philippines is not only in income, but also in land distribution, welfare, and human development. The ADB study showed that the richest 10% of Filipino families were raking in more than a third of the country's total income. The World Bank report also showed that the richest 20% of the population in the Philippines outspend the poorest 20% by more than 8 times. Meanwhile, other huge sectors of the Filipino industry such as banking, telecommunications, and property development are almost entirely monopolized by few political families, most of whom have been in power since the Spanish colonial era. For example, the Ayalas, Lopez, Zubels, and the Cojuangcos. And despite wide-reaching government reforms from the 1980s, those industries remain effective oligarchs or cartels that vastly outperform small businesses. According to a paper released by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, small and medium enterprises account for roughly 99% of Filipino firms. However, those SMEs only account for 35% of national output, a sharp contrast with Japan and Korea, where the same ratio of SMEs accounts for roughly half of total output. This translates into far fewer high-paying jobs on the local level for Filipino employees and exacerbates the huge income disparity across the country. So while we do have a great regulatory system, it does not take away the fact that it contributes to another issue that is crucial to put our focus on, especially that it means most of the finances of the market are held by big known names whose statuses have a wide gap from the usual Juan de la Cruz. Next up, we can look at the oligarch families in the Philippines.
Perhaps the most interesting aspect of the economic structure of the Philippines is the way big businesses connive with political dynasties in order to achieve mutual gain. This has been noted by analyst Yen Macabenta in his editorial article on Oligarchipelago. Despite Duterte's attempts at singling out specific public figures, the fact remains that a huge portion of our economic gains go to the top 1% of our country. This is supported by data which shows the tens of billions of dollars gained by the top 10 wealthiest figures in the Philippines from 2009 to 2014. Their combined net gain amounts to $39.5 billion. The fact that control over huge metropolitan industries belong to a small fraction of businessmen is an irksome fact. For many financial analysts, because our system vastly differs from European countries that offer sustainable growth for all its citizens. In this sense, we have to question if the capitalist methods of our country really is the way towards the collective growth we wish to achieve. After all, the economic growth our country achieves does not seem to trickle down. Like what Keenan said from the Atlantic, the bleak reality remains. 32% of young kids in the Philippines experience malnutrition. 60% of Filipinos die from untreated diseases due to the lack of access to healthcare. The irony remains that the Philippines has been heralded as the new Southeast Asian tiger economy, yet living conditions have remained unchanged. Tall and fancy skyscrapers continue to rise in the metropolitan area, yet social development remains stagnant. Considering how profit does not trickle down from big business to the working class, it seems that the design of our economy is skewed unfavorably against the masses. Furthermore, Keenan states, the fact that oligarch-run businesses have a tendency to crush competition, thereby creating a problem of income disparity between people who work for big businesses and everyone else. Economic growth does not seem to reach people in the slum areas, whose only means of income is through low-profit jobs like selling bottled waters in buses or streets. Economic growth is definitely a positive thing, as it lifts the country in the world market. It shows our potential and competency. But such dirt behind it can be questionable, and can be argued for in terms of actual development of a country. Oh, but only they can be in charge. Well, hopefully, at least just for now.